I'd like to now introduce you to Dr. Marla Abodeely. She is a scientist from Shire leading the Bioassay group there. She has more than 10 years of experience with difficult, challenging assays. They're not all difficult, but she's had a lot of experiences. I'm sure some of you have as well. So I'd like to introduce her to speak on this topic today.
Thank you so much, Beth, and thank you for inviting me here today, organizers. It's really nice to be here on this hopefully no snow day, just sun. Yesterday scared me. Again, my name is Marla Abodeely, and I'm head of the Bioassay group at Shire, and I've been there since about 2011. And so I'm going to start today, and I figure this is a topic everyone knows about, and I'm trying to show the positive of a cell-based assay. So the title is The Upside of a Difficult Method Transfer. So as you know, method transfer is just an integral part of our life. It is essential and it's significant, and it comes with its challenges. And basically it can come in many flavors. You can outsource something, so you're doing a method transfer outsourced. You could be insourced, even insourcing method transfers, as you know, and it serves a lot of different functions. It can give you increased testing capability and capacity. It can sometimes give you speed if you're set up properly. It can also help you as an important part as part of commercialization. So that's when it's an exciting part, when you get to that stage. But regardless, we all have our hiccups. And they all come with logistical challenges, monetary challenges, and just the nature of the speed of business. I can't get over how fast things have gotten. There's really, you need to be ready. You need to be prepared ahead of time and ready and as much as possible. And sometimes you can't be, and you just got to do with what you have to meet the deadlines. So that sort of sets the stage, and I'm going to tell you about a cell proliferation assay. It was about a phase 2 program when Shire acquired this product. And we thought, okay, a simple proliferation assay, slam dunk. We all deserve some of those sometimes. And it actually was going very well. We had a successful method optimization where we really reformatted the method. We changed the analytical approach. We changed the replicate strategy. And we got it to behave very well in a decent amount of time. I would say about 4 months, which is on the shorter side. Sometimes you get a method and you're working 6 to 9 months, 12 months on something. And then we ran it in our shop in the Bioassay team in analytical development under PDTS, Process Development Technical Services team. And we supported the upstream, the downstream, and the formulation teams and giving them good data. And it performed well. We were able to get an independent assay control rate in there. We were able to monitor that. Everything was going beautifully for a couple of years. And then we went to method qualification, getting ready for phase 3. And that went beautifully. We did about 21 runs. We had 2 to 3 analysts. We had a IP, an intermediate precision of about 6%, even under. I mean, this was really solid. And through that time, we did exactly what we were supposed to do. Multiple reagent lots for everything, for plates, for buffers, for critical reagents. We identified those. We had multiple analysts. We had different pieces of equipment. We had 2 readers in our shop. We made sure to check everything. And most importantly, in New England, as you know, is get through the seasons. Because these cells, they are living, and we don't have control of these living beings, although we might want to. So here we go. We're going to do an internal transfer with this one. We also did an external transfer, but that actually turned out to be easier than the internal transfer, believe it or not. Thankfully, this difficult transfer was local. It was in the building next door, and so we were lucky here. But it was a phase 2 to phase 3 transfer of activities from AD to QC at Shire in Lexington, and we did what you think a typical approach would be. We had the QC analysts, experienced analysts, come over, people who had done cell-based assays for many years. They came over to analytical development, to AD, and they watched one. They ran 1 or 2. Everything looked great. And then we got to the fact that we had to head over to their lab now to run one in their one as part of the training. And you can see, I told you we had a really nice qualification, and you can see the curves on the left show examples of what our curves look like pretty much all through qualification. We have a very low curve failure rate during the qualification of 21 runs. And then we got to QC, and these are basically what they started to look like. So the readout, I should say, is PNPP. This was a cell proliferation assay. So we had the readout on the y-axis, and we had the dose on the x-axis. And this is a sample curve from PLA. We use Stegman's PLA system. So we had a problem. Where do we begin? So the first thing we did was to establish a tool. And this tool was because we wanted something non-subjective. You know, the eye is good, and I actually believe, and you probably feel the same way, with cell-based assays in particular, it really, look at the data, look at the raw data. I think everyone tells you that, look at the curve, trust your gut when you're seeing things. But we also wanted to, so we saw with our eye what that looked like, and now we wanted a non-subjective. So we used what's called relative CI as a measure of potency of assay performance. And the way this is that you take your 95% confidence interval, you subtract the upper bound confidence interval, CI, minus the lower CI, and then you divide it by your relative potency. And I just gave some examples here of the 14 point, you know, this is the example of a good curve. And as you can see, as the parallelism gets sort of stretched, and you're pushing the bounds of the assay a little bit, you can see that the relative CI gets larger. So this was our tool to be able to non-subjectively do our studies. So we stepped back, and there's the usual suspects for cell-based assay. There just are. There's analysts, reagents, equipment, cell health, all these things that I'm sure you're all familiar with. And we did a DOE. We planned and we performed it. And luckily, we had a lot of analysts that could be involved in this. This became the priority. There was a strong business driver to get this into quality. And the first thing we saw, we decided to take a closer look at the training run. So on the y-axis, we have plotted here that relative CI value I just told you, our tool. And on the x-axis gets a little complicated. But the x-axis legend here is analyst, lab, run. So the analysts are down here. And these are our two QC analysts. This one's probably a little more seasoned, and this one we pulled him out of, he was very seasoned. He was actually in my lab, and then he had to leave carpal tunnel, and he left the lab. But we brought him in just for this. He was willing to do it. And then we had the lab, AD, QC, AD, QC. And what you, let me go forward a little bit. So what we started to notice is that there was basically a difference in performance. It seemed to be mitigated by the level of experience from the analyst. So there's something in the analyst technique that could mitigate this. But these are two seasoned analysts, but one was really heavy duty into the testing at this point. And you could see that the QC noise and the spread of the data was much larger than the AD. So we started to backtrack a little, and we started to look at reagents as well. So again, the CI, this is the spread of the data on the y-axis, and on the x, the legend is analyst, lab, reagent. So again, analyst down here, what lab the method was performed in, and which reagents the lab was performed in. And again, we're seeing a big spread of data. I should say at this point that we were doing so many runs. So I'm not going to go through the whole DOEs that we did. I've just picked some select few that kind of helped narrow us down to find the root causes. So we had a lot of data here, and we decided to reformat the data. And so we looked again at the relative confidence interval for relative potency. This time, we took out reagents, and we just looked at analyst and lab. So you can see that the QC, if we do that, again, you see a big spread in the data with the QC population versus the AD, and again, that issue where a more experienced analyst seems to be able to mitigate something. But again, the lab was a really key piece here. However, like I said, reagents were being swapped. So then we decided to say, okay, let's just look at the cells again. We've been looking at them all through qualification, through development. Remember that we've used over 2 years worth of different lots of plates, reagents, everything, and we saw this. So this is what you don't want to see. This should be a confluent monolayer. These are human osteosarcoma cells, and this is just not what you want to see. The cells don't look healthy here. So we got lucky, and this is, you know, we did get very lucky in that we were able to, again, we have a very seasoned AD analyst now, Riddhi, and she looked at AD lab and QC lab. So basically, she set up one assay, actually many assays, to look at different vendors of the plates, because she happened to find during all this an old lot, a box full of our old lot of that original vendor, the one that we used in qualification. And sure enough, we then also identified two other lots, two other vendors. This is one of the other two that we found. This one just seemed to be a little bit tighter. Again, we're looking at relative CI. The original vendor in the qualification lot, the relative CI was much narrower. However, when we brought in the new lot, which we didn't suspect because we've been changing lots so frequently, we saw a big disconnect here. We identified two vendors this time because we wanted to be safe heading into QC, and we started to implement one of the replacement vendors. And for that new replacement vendor, we evaluated many lots from that vendor as well. And we saw some consistency. We then put into the test method ways for the QC analysts to be able to qualify each new lot of plate. We identified it as a critical reagent, and that their critical reagent team, support team, should really buy in bulk and have QC do their evaluation. So before and after. So we thought, okay, we're out of the woods. However, not quite. Why would it be that easy? We had other DOE studies going on, because we were able to put most of the team on this. And in parallel, about the same time we were toasting champagne glasses, we had someone come in with their data. And we're checking all the boxes. So this person was responsible for checking the equipment. So we performed one assay. We ran the plates in AD and QC. The data spread for the estimated potencies for single curves was still larger in QC. So I don't know if you see in blue there. I'm used to walking around a lot. You can see in blue that the spread in AD, so this circle is exactly this circle. I drew this circle, and I did a copy and paste, and I overlaid them, and then I glided it over to show you that the spread is a little bit wider. Oh, sorry. And so also with the maroon. And this was true for all the DL levels. So we looked at 100, 250 in each of the labs. Remember, these are the same. This is one assay. It's actually 4 plates. And it's run in AD equipment first, and then in QC equipment. And the spread of the data was much wider. So, okay, what do we do now? We call the vendor, the equipment vendor. And it was determined that all readers assessed in AD and QC, both AD and QC, each had 2 of these same readers. And we found that they could benefit from a realignment. I don't fully understand, I'll be honest, all these gross alignments and absorbance correction. And they only do this test not part of the usual PM services. They only do it when they replace a part or set up a new instrument. And actually, the technician that came in said this actually wouldn't worry him. He said he does set up a new instrument with the crosshairs in the middle of the red, as you can imagine, same with this separate test. He actually looked at this, and they wouldn't consider anything wrong here. We're like, okay, it's not in the green, it's not in the blue. So this was fine. These are not, like I mentioned, usually assessed during a PM, because we had QC's instrument PM during this. And again, they found nothing, and they didn't really believe us. So we were very fortunate that this vendor at that time, who has since left the company, but this application scientist with this vendor, it was just excellent. I'm not even going to say his name, Greg Warner. He's amazing. And he took the extra steps, and he said, why don't we separate the assay from the biology? So he recommended using yellow number 5. It's similar absorbance to PNP, which was our substrate in our assay, our readout. And he set it up, we did a titration, we set it up so the absorbance range was in line with our assay range, so that we could separate from the biology, but still get that same signal range. And we did a uniform dose across the plate. We don't use at Shire any of our outer wells or rows, so that's why those are grayed out. It should be grayed out here as well. And so this tartrazine was put everywhere uniform. We read the same plate in AD and QC, so this test plate in both labs, and I have the ODs there, and this is what we found. This was the result of this one test plate. So this is a complicated slide, so I'm just going to click first. So the AD transferring lab, again, remember this is all one dose, you can see the column CVs are down here, and they're all roughly about the same. If you look down to the receiving lab, you can see that they're higher than the AD lab. But if you look more closely, we separated out. We started to notice a trend, and this is where I say, I think as bioimmunoassay people, I can't speak for other biophysical methods, is that looking at the raw data is just something so simple can really reveal a lot. And what this showed us is that there was a trend. So they're color-coded here. In white, you can see that this is at 0.7, 0.7, here 0.76. So alternating rows consistently read differently on something that should be the same. And we did the CVs. What I did here was calculate the CVs for just B, D, and F, and the CVs for C, E, and G. And you can see they're comparable, and that's why you're getting this low CV. But here you can see there's a big disconnect. So what does that mean? So does this matter? Now, the vendor said, oh, for percent, even the application scientist who was well-meaning said that's not going to have much of an impact on your data. Well, does it? You don't know. So you do the basic experiment. We set up 2 reference standards in C and F. We set up mock samples, DL levels, at 50, 100, and 200. So there's 200 of our nominal, which is this reference standard against itself. The percent RP was calculated for each sample against both reference standards on the plate, and the sample experimental plates was read, the same plates were read in AD, and then walked across. This is where it was really nice to be local. We could walk across to the next building and read on 2 instruments over there. And we did find a disconnect, because you would expect, let me go here, so AD is here on the left on this chart. And in AD, you would expect to be around nominal. So a little bit above, a little bit below. There was, I think, 40% more above. I think the range here was 5 to minus 13, or 3 to minus 13, or minus 15. But AD's, what that came up with, because this is the delta of the RP, I should have said that on the x-axis. In Lab 2, QC, everything was positive, and you don't expect to see that, and well above positive, 3 to 20%. Okay. So what's going on? And we learned more about how the plate reader reads. And I'm a little bit ashamed to say I didn't realize that. So back to our college classes, the beer Lambert Law. So path length has a direct relationship with absorbance. No surprise, we all know that. And so if the path is reading, remember the crosshairs? If we're reading right directly, that gives us 1 absorbance. If we're over here, we get a slightly different absorbance. Normally that wouldn't matter so much because it's relative potency. As you all know, we do relative potency typically in bioassay anyway. And so that shouldn't be a problem. But what we learned is that their readers read serpentine. They're set up by default to read serpentine. So it's starting to make sense. We found out from the application scientists that we actually had another choice. We could read typewriter. So I will go back to say that when we flipped this plate around, the pattern was just flipped. So there was something there. And likely maybe a step motor was the first thought that came to mind. But you got to understand the business drivers for this program were huge. So I met more senior people, and my boss had just left the company. My manager had just left the company. He was brilliant and so fun to work with. And he leaves me right before this, right like this investigation was starting. So I'm put in these positions, these rooms, and these people are saying, no, Marla. I'm like, no, yes. So I had to go and tell senior management in QC that there might be something wrong with both of their plate readers that is used to release commercial product. Not fun. Not fun. What we realized is that this is specific to absorbance colorimetric assays. Thank God we didn't have any absorbance methods, readout methods in QC to release commercial product or any product or clinical that use this. We were using fluorescence for all of our other methods, so that's why we didn't catch it earlier. It was just because we're using absorbance, and where path length makes a significant difference. So, and again, the program business, business these days, you got to move. And so we said, look, this isn't going to work, but till we validate a new instrument, we're not going to meet deadlines. So he said recommended typewriter error. Like, okay, well, what is that going to look like now? So we had QC, we did the same thing again with that uniform plate. And QC, we went the way it normally is set with a serpentine read. And we saw the same pattern where we had this disconnect, and we saw that. We then switched the QC lab reading style to typewriter. And we saw a difference. We got it. We actually got it. This is a stopgap, but at least we have something now to continue. If we look further, we go back to the AD lab. In the AD lab, we did not have the same problem with the serpentine. It's probably something to do with the step motors. Why 2 step motors in QC? There's a long investigation open for that. But going forward, I'm not sure. So what's the overall on here? So looking at the potency of these mock samples, 50, 100, 200, what we found was that AD was not affected by doing either mode. So we have AD lab, QC lab. We have the percent potency of single replicate curves. We have 200 where it should be, and 200 using the typewriter, we see comparable. However, and then when we switch QCs, both their readers to typewriter mode, we see it's been corrected. Versus when it reads into this in the serpentine mode. So basically, we all agreed, QC and AD, this was going to be the stopgap. And doing it in the typewriter mode, it started to perform exactly like an AD during the qualification. So we had integrity there. The assay control looked good. Everything looked good. So we continued with the transfer. So lessons learned. The method can be fickle. And don't rely on the vendor's QC checks. You can't. To a certain degree, yes, but make sure for your own method, look at those vendor checks in context of your own method. Just get down to the details, down to the nitty-gritty. And if you can all do this before tech transfer. During tech transfer, we all have these boxes, right? Do they have this kind of reader, or this kind, solo VP? What are the equipment? We match them by model as much as we can. But dive a little deeper. Learn how each reads, just a little bit deeper in tech transfer, and maybe do some early runs if you can. And then when it comes to equipment, the devil's in the details. And that's basically me saying the same thing I've said, is that these vendors, their preventive maintenance doesn't always match what we need in our method. And that's a big thing. And I'll say that the scientist on this, my group was just fantastic. And they just proved again, DOEs are great, they're powerful, we should continue to do them, but chance favors the prepared mind, and we have someone in my group that should work for the CIA because I would sleep so much better at night, because he looks at every detailed raw data coming in, and he finds these things, and it's really amazing. So I did promise an upside in my title, and I do think there's an upside here. I think there are 2 pieces. We want product understanding. We need product understanding, product characterization, and methods can give us that. But on the flip side, we really need also method understanding, really understand our method, even if it's something as basic as a cell proliferation assay. And that enables us to put better method controls into our TM, into our practices. And also, it gets us ready for, all part of commercial investigations, and they're not fun. The more we see now, although it hurts, and the business people are breathing down your neck, it actually gets us ready to go into commercialization, be ready to start adding to the list, and it gets us ready for the next one. And that gives me to what we're all trying to do, is really just progress programs to get therapies to new patients and continue that supply to patients, because that's why we're here. That's why we do what we do, and why we support QC so much, even though sometimes it gets harder and harder. But I think it does make us better to head into the next assay that we hit. I think it is. There's a folklore with cell-based assays, so we're just trying to unravel that. And with that, I'll say thank you to my team was fantastic. So Craig, really, I would sleep better Homeland Security. I tell him all the time. Riddhi Dalvi, Rati, they looked at the cells, just basically looking at cell health and their diligence in executing. They didn't deviate from the DOEs and the TMs. And the QC folks, Chris and Nancy, were fantastic. Again, they didn't deviate from the TM. We have a great relationship with them. We've built trust over the last 7 years, and it shows. And, excuse me. And I'll have to give a big hand to Greg Warner. He had left this vendor. I shouldn't have PerkinElmer up there, I'm sorry. I just realized it was up there. But he was fantastic, and he talked to us as a scientist and really helped us figure out what's going on. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it.